Okay, cool. Here we go. Let's click on that so you can see a little bit better. Here we go. All right. Okay. Class, bring it in. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. We are doing an introduction to algebra vocabulary today. Terms, coefficients, equations, etc. Okay? I'm going to slide this thing over. I'm close. Close to the screen. I just don't want to be in your way. Can you still see? All right, there we go. Now you can see me and the screen. All right. So, the whole purpose of learning about expressions, which is what this unit is on, chapter 3, unit 3, excuse me, is to help us set up our basic knowledge for equations. Who knows what an equation is? Who has seen an equation before? That's better. Good. So the reality is we're just setting these up. Expressions help us learn a little bit about equations. Equations are what we use to help represent the real world. It's really helpful. So we're going to set up some vocab, some basic vocab for us to be able to do that. So, introduction to vocabulary. An equation is a math sentence that states that two quantities are equal. Boom. I wonder if you can see that on the screen. Hopefully you can. It will have what? It's going to have two sides. Okay? It'll have an equal sign. Right there. Equal sign. The equation says what is on the left, and on this equation, 3x minus 4, is equal to what's on the right, 7. So what this is saying is these two sides are equivalent. All right, equal in value. So there are parts of an equation, 3 parts that four parts really, but 3 parts that are really important for us, okay? So a variable is the first one. Variables are in equations a lot of times. A lot of times variables are in equations, okay? A variable is a letter that represents a number we don't know yet. And that's this. Okay? Every variable has a coefficient. Everybody say coefficient.
Coefficient.
Good. Every variable, every single one, even if there's no number in front of it. If there's no number in front of the variable, do you remember what number it is?
1.
It's 1. If I have an x, how many x's do I have?
1.
1x, right? So a coefficient is the number in front of the variable. Okay? Okay, it can be next to or under. Sometimes you have a division, and the coefficient is then a fraction. So, this 3 is the coefficient. Sorry, it's hard for me to write. 3 is the coefficient. Everybody say coefficient?
Coefficient.
Good, so how many x's do we have?
3.
How many x's do we have?
3.
Good, it's multiplication. There are 3 x's. And then there's a constant, okay? Constant. Let's go with red. Constant is a number with no variable attached. It's just a number. This number, look carefully, notice what I underlined. What did I underline? -4. That's my constant. Don't forget with the constant, the sign is attached. Yeah, You all know my handwriting's bad because of my messed up thumb. My bum thumb. That's why you gotta listen, right? So all of these things, variables, coefficients, and constants, are terms. Okay? Right? So in our quick quad today, we looked at our terms. These things. A single number is a term. That's a constant. So -4 is a term. A single variable, so like a variable by itself. Okay? So like x or y. Or over there, x and z. Right? Those are terms. Or the product of a number and variables. So like a coefficient. So 3x is a term. All of those are terms. All right? So let's look at some problems where we can identify some terms. Okay? So we're going to identify terms and variables and coefficients. So don't forget, single number, single variable, the product of a number and a coefficient. Okay? So the terms here, we're just going to list them. All right? So I find it helpful to just kind of do the circle method. But, what'd you say? There's a lot less than 15. The terms are most often separated by a plus or a minus symbol. But be careful. That plus or minus is attached to what it's next to. So, when we look at these terms, let's just use the circle method real fast. 2k, positive 15, negative m, negative 3, positive n, and negative 7p. I've now created a list, right? So my terms are 2k, 15, negative m, negative 3, positive n, negative 7p. Terms are a number, a variable, or the product of a number and variable. What are our variables? Well, in this list, our variables are k, m, n, and p. They're just the letters. What are the coefficients? Now the coefficients, once again, what are the coefficients again?
The
Number in front of the variable. Okay, so our coefficients, well, that means we need to look at the number in front of k. What number is in front of k? 2. We need to look at the number in front of m. Uh-oh. What is the number that's being multiplied by m?
1.
There's a missing number there. It's not there. So there is an invisible number, 1, right there. There's an invisible 1. So what is the coefficient of m?
1.
It's not 1.
M.
M is a letter, so that would be a variable. A coefficient is the number that's being multiplied times m. What is the number that's inside of that circle?
0.
Read with me. What does it say? -1. Oh, so there's that minus sign, right? That minus sign isn't a minus sign once we circle. Once we use that circle method. So Stephen earlier asked, what's that circle method do for us? And I mentioned it turns it from an expression where you have subtraction and like addition and subtraction, it changes it to a negative sign. It helps us see it differently. So the coefficient in front of m is -1. The coefficient in front of n is what? Is +1, because there's an invisible 1 in front of that n. Remember, if I have an n, how many n's do I have? 1 n. If I have n, it's 1 n. Okay? If I have a negative m, how many negative m's do I have? I have 1 negative m. So negative 1. So then the variable in front of n is +1. What's the number in front of 7? Or 10. There we go. The number in front of p? -7. And then the constants. Remember, a constant is what? Look at the definition. A number with no variable. So what are our constants in this list? +15 and -3. Okay, I want you and the person next to you to go through the next one that's right there. Do all lists. Make sure you identify, notice that thinking bubble. It says, what coefficient does this variable have? We talked about it over here. Make sure we identify it there, okay? So I'm going to pause the screen. I'm going to throw them up there. I want you talking through these with your partner. Ready, set, and turn in. Talk. Go. I'm going to throw these answers up periodically. I'm going to throw the answers up there periodically for you to check each line as you go. All right, they are all up there for you to check now. Which one is different than what you may have thought?
Oh, the variables.
Yeah. How many people put C, C, and C? Yeah, definitely. Those are all the same variable, right? So if we were to ask you which letters are present in this expression, that's what this is called. This is called expression. If I asked you a different question, what letters are in this expression, you would just say C. So when you think about variables, a lot of times expressions all have the same variable, because later on, tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but Friday, or whatever day that is, sorry, video people, it's probably not that same day. Next lesson, there we go, that's good, next lesson. We're going to learn how to combine like terms. We would be able to simplify this entire thing to a C term and a constant. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms here. 6 separate terms. We're eventually going to be able to simplify that down to 2 terms. One term that has a C and one term that doesn't. We're not going to do that today. Right now we're just practicing identifying. So the variable isn't C, C, and C. It's just C. There's only one variable in it. Questions on the coefficients and the constants. The one that catches people is that -1, right? Because that 1 you don't see, do you? You don't see the 1. You don't see that -1, but that thought bubble hopefully reminded you, hey, if I have a negative C, how many C's do I have? 1. I've got a negative C, so I have 1 negative C. Right? It's all about how you say it. If you say it to yourself, oh, there's a C, that means I have a C, that's 1 C. All right, let's flip over to the next page. I forgot that I froze it. So I mentioned the word expression. That's an important one for us, the word expression. All right. I'll bring this a little closer. A little bit better. That word expression is important. That's what this entire unit's about, okay? An expression is just a group of terms, okay? It contains numbers, something, and variables.
What is write something?
Numbers, something, and variables.
Equal sign.
I love it. That's actually not what it has. Great try. No, coefficients would be numbers, right? Signs. And really, we're thinking about that in terms of operations, right? Pluses, minuses, times, division, square roots, exponents, those are expressions, okay? Operations, signs. It does not contain an equal sign. So Kobe, that's why I was like, good try, I love it. But it doesn't contain an equal sign.
I said the opposite.
Exactly. But you got us to the point. You got us to the point where we have a learning opportunity. That's why I don't care if we get things wrong, because it gives us a learning opportunity to look if we get something wrong. So we have 3 parts of an expression that we focus on: coefficients, constants, and variables, right? Well, let's identify. I've given us 3 things. So we have our terms. We have coefficients, constants, and variables. So the 8. Which of those 3 is that one? Well, when we look at it, we have to describe what it's doing. It's telling us how many y's there are, right? It's going to be our coefficient. It's our coefficient. Now, I forgot to put the little circle around the y, so go ahead and add that circle around the y. Sorry about that. What is that one? Silali.
It is the variable.
It's our variable, it's the letter. And the other circled term, the other circled thing would be a constant. Why is it a constant? Give me a hand on this one. Ashley,
Because it doesn't have a variable.
say it again, I couldn't hear you.
It doesn't have a variable attached.
Exactly, it's a number all by itself. All right? How many terms are there in this expression? If we were to use the circle method and circle everything in between the terms, how many terms are there? Hannah? There are 3 terms. Those terms are 8y, -7, and 2y. Positive 2y, right?
Yes, sir.
Positive 8y. All right, we'll do one more together. The circled thing is and we can say this one all together. The first circle is pointing to a what?
Variable.
Variable. The second circle is pointing to a constant. And the third circle is pointing to a,
Coefficient.
everybody say it one more time with confidence.
Coefficient.
Coefficient. Man, I like that yell. That was confidence right there.
Yeah.
That was confident. And now the number of terms is pretty much the things that are separated by the plus and minus signs, right? The number of terms. So how many terms are there?
4, 1, 2.
There's 5. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 plus and minus signs. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. The first term is m. The next term is
4.
positive 4. The next term is
Positive.
positive 2. The next term is,
-7.
careful,
-7.
that circle makes it a little confusing, but it's -7m. The coefficient is always attached to a variable. -7m
And then positive 6.
and 6. Positive 6. Okay, we have a couple of sample problems. We're going to get through a few of them. I'm going to pass out your homework as we do a few of these. I want to get through at least the first 2. Okay? Identify the terms. So you're literally just going to list. All right? Do you want me to do this one with you as well? Or do you think you guys,
I
with
think
your
you
partner,
do it.
can do it?
I think we can do it.
Let me just walk you through it. I'm not going to do it with you. With terms, you are going to list them. Use the circle method. It'll help. Just list the terms. The variables, you're just going to list the variables, tell us what letters are present. The coefficients are just the numbers that are attached to the variable through multiplication. And then the constants, remember, what's a constant? It's a what? Luke?
It's the number.
It's a number that has no variable attached to it. Hey, why is it called a constant? It's not going to change. Hey, if I plug in, let's say I'm looking at 4a, -4a. Hey, stop doing the problem. Thank you. Look at -4a. If I plug in 2 to that, what's that term's value going to be? -4 times 2, which would be what? What if I plugged in 3 for a? -4 times 3 would give me -12. That changes, right? That's why we call it a variable, because it will vary. But what if I plug in -2 to a, and I look at 5 in this expression? I look at 5 in the expression. What's the value of 5 going to be? If I plug in 2 for a, what's the value of 5 going to be? What if I plug in 3 for a? What's the value of 5 going to be? What if I plug in any number for a? What's the value of the 5 term going to be? So why is it called a constant? It stays the same no matter what the variables do. That constant value stays constant. It stays the same. Okay, you guys continue working to pass out your homework as you're working on these problems. I'll throw the answers up in just a moment once I'm done passing them out.
Okay, so like in that first one, then go back to your next page. Okay. So yes, -4a is true, right, that's the first one.
Hey, I want you to at least finish number 3 on the notes. At least number 3. I'm gonna get to it. Assignment number 29, I think. Thank you. All right, eyes up for number 3. Which number or letter do you think people might mess up? On number 3, which one of these? First off, red line, green line, blue line, or purple line? Do you think people will make a mistake? It's going to be the blue line. Which part of the blue line? Tori? The C, the coefficient on C. How many C's are there? There's a positive C, which means there's 1 positive C. Don't forget, if you can't see a coefficient in front of a variable, what is it? It's 1. Ashley, question.
If it's a negative, would the coefficient then be negative 1?
Say that again.
If that was like negative c, would the coefficient be negative 1?
That's a perfect question. Look at number 4. And when we get to our coefficients, I'm going to skip to the coefficients for those values. I'll circle them. So let's get to the coefficients. I'm going to go straight to that line. So our coefficient would be negative 5, because it's negative 5h. And then what's the number in front of the k? It's how many k's are there? There's a negative k.
1.
So that means there's 1 negative k. Throw that 1 there. So that means the coefficient would be negative 1. You're absolutely right. Great question. If there's a negative sign in front of that k, hey, do you see how the circle method can help you identify the terms? So that's the whole reason why I taught you the circle method with subtraction. Eventually, when we get to combining like terms, the next lesson, we're going to turn some of those circles into rectangles. We're going to turn some of those circles into triangles. It's kind of nice. Okay?
For number 3, we have 2 ones.
Hang tight real fast, just a second. It is assignment number 29.
Got it.
And then on your homework, you're just telling the number of terms, coefficients, and then you're listing the coefficients and listing the constants. Okay? All right, cool.
Mr. Strand, do you know